Welcome to the Classic Faserip podcast. We're back with another episode finally after a long break. I'm Vince and I'm sitting with Keith. Keith, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing well, Vincent. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. And it's been some time since we've done a show. I know we've, conflicting schedules, things happen. What are you gonna do? Yada yada yada, right? It happens.
That's it.
Anyway, so things have happened. Apparently, during the time frame, well, not apparently, it did happen. Stan Lee did pass away. We did not have a chance to do a show that we had planned, just giving him a moment of his time to reflect upon that. And did we or did we not? I don't really remember if we did or not. I know we had something planned.
We talked about his passing before it happened, and then it happened, and I don't think we were able to get back to it and talk about it in any great detail. It, and it's sad. I think we talked about it a little bit afterwards, but I mean, yeah, we talked about it. I
Okay.
think we did.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's been so long. I thought I had something written in our notes that said, talk a little bit more about Stan Lee passing, but I wasn't sure if we included that on the last show because it got moved to this show on my note section. So maybe I forgot to cross it back out when we covered it. So I do apologize if we did it on the last show, but it's Stan Lee, so he gets all the credit because without him we wouldn't have these wonderful comics that we love and read and these RPGs that we love and play. So thank you, Stan Lee.
Thank you.
Also, during that time frame, we've had a couple things happen movies wise, but we'll get up to the point here because it's been some time. Captain Marvel's out. Yay! This is the link to Endgame. So before we get into the review, Keith, you did see it. You'll give us a little bit of a heads up on what you think about it, and we'll give you people out there will give you a 3-second chance to just pause or go forward because there'll be some spoilers in here. And I think if you don't want to hear it, you can just jump ahead. I'll try to put like a time code in here or something for you all to jump ahead or not. But the directors have said of this movie that if you don't want to see this movie, you could read spoilers on the internet and then watch the little end frame things of on YouTube or something because they know it's gonna leak, and you can pass this movie up and still see Endgame and not have a disappointing time and be confused. Without going into the movie itself, Keith, does that stand true?
Yes.
Great. So for those out there that don't wish to see Captain Marvel for whatever reason, or don't have a chance to go see it, or want to wait till it comes out on DVD, you can do that. Or see the spoilers and just go see Endgame. But let's get on to what people care about, and that's how the movie was. But if you don't want to know because you haven't seen it and you're going to go see it, hit pause now, or maybe fast forward a little. Check the time codes out in the YouTube video, because yes, we are on YouTube, and we're recording audio right now. And we'll put that also in there so you could just skip ahead for a couple minutes, probably be about 10 minutes or so, but I'll try to put a time code in the audio as well. So now that we're done with that, 3, 2, Keith, tell us about Captain Marvel.
If you are familiar with the Carol Danvers character, the origin as it is presented in the movie hews pretty close to the comic books. And I hate this, and we were talking about this before, I hate that this has been spoiled on the internet, but Marvel is in the movie, represented by rather unorthodox choice. But it plays out pretty well and works well enough within the contents of the movie. All of the characters, whether they're Skrull or Kree or whoever, work in terms of the conflict in the movie. They did change some stuff up that I didn't foresee happening, and I didn't, in terms of the conflict with the characters, they made some rather unorthodox choices. Fury and Coulson both get different reactions from the audience. I think Coulson's been gone long enough and on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. long enough that no one really remembers him much from the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's funny to see him de-age. The Skrulls are pretty much Skrulls from the comic books, with a few exceptions. I know that we're giving a review. I try. I mean, I for myself don't like a bunch of spoilers, but I understand that in terms of what we're doing for the review here. So within the context of the movie, it actually works out pretty well. They did change some stuff. If you're looking for the Kree-Skrull War or the Secret Invasion, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Okay.
If you're looking for the standard conflict between the two, they made it a little different for the movie, which I had to question why they made the choice they made. I guess it was to make it more sympathetic in terms of who the protagonist and antagonist is within the context of the war. Carol Danvers, as she is presented in the movie, is the character from the comic books. She deals with amnesia up until about halfway through the movie, and then when you finally get who she was, where she came from, that sort of thing. And of course, the audience knows it because we have an understanding of who Carol Danvers is. Your layman probably would not, but it works out well. And it actually works within the context of the movie. I read a lot of, I read some reviews where people made commentary and this and that and the other, and I thought, this is your standard Marvel movie. It really is. It's an origin movie. The difference is it probably goes a little closer to, I would say, Guardians of the Galaxy because of the nature that it undertakes.
Kind of a goofy vibe, or
no, more of a space vibe.
Space vibe.
You get space travel and whatnot, and you see some familiar characters from the Guardians movies. You see a familiar plaything from the Avengers movies. There's some stuff shows up. The cat. The cat steals the movie.
Yeah, I heard the cat stole the whole entire thing, man.
Yeah, he's hysterical, and the Skrull, every time one of the Skrulls get anywhere near it, and they're flipping out, going, you shouldn't have that thing on your lap. You shouldn't have that thing near you. And Sam Jackson's like, what? It's a cat. What's the problem? And then when you see what it really is, it's that much funnier.
The cat is the reason why he loses his eye, right?
And that's yes. I mean, for we've warned people about spoilers. I'll just give it to you. And it happens. He gets wounded early in the movie, and someone's like, "You should have your eye looked at," and he's like, "I'm fine. It's better. Don't worry about it." And then something happens with the cat, and he takes a paw to the face.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm fine. Don't worry about it." And the Skrull who's watching in the background is like, And the next scene you see, he's got a patch over it, and Coulson comes in with a number of fake eyes for him. And it's like, you had a big decision ahead of you, sir. And he's like, yeah, okay. And of course, nobody knows what really happened. So the question becomes, is it true that the Kree put your eye out because you wouldn't reveal where such and such was? And he's like, I can't confirm nor deny that. And he's like, you can tell, I'm embarrassed. I had my damn eye put out by a cat, so shut up and go away. But everything works out pretty well. You get as much of an explanation as you need for any of it in the movies. The biggest changes came to the Skrulls and how they're part in the war. Okay. They're not the warlike. They are militaristic, they do have shape-shifting abilities, but the big thing that they do in the movie that to me changed it quite a bit is they made them refugees. They've been
Oh,
hounded almost to the point of extinction by the Kree, and the Kree just aren't backing off. So it puts them in a more sympathetic light. You find out that part of the research that Marvel was doing on Earth was to develop technology to help them get to a safe world. And that Marvel was basically rebelling against the Empire.
hmm.
So, but it's like I said, it's one of those things where they do a fair amount of exposition. They get you some background stuff. You find out about the Kree and the Skrull, and they leave it wide open for more adventures.
So how does this tie in with Infinity War or Endgame now at this point?
Um, the Tesseract's in it.
Okay.
And the Tesseract is what was initially powering the Star Core that they were using on the faster than light ship, which blows up and suffuses Carol Danvers with energy. So she literally has gotten her power from the Tesseract.
All right.
Which, I thought, okay, well, if you're going to go a route, that's the way to do it. You tie it into all of your movies, and they do a couple things that I just wasn't really too sure about, and that was that wasn't one of them. The change of the scrolls, and of course, somebody questioned that, and the answer that was given was basically, well, there are good people and bad people. Why can't there be good scrolls and bad scrolls? It's like, well, okay, that makes
Yeah.
very simplistic sense.
Very true. There has to be at least some good ones, right?
And that's it. So, but like I said, it was interesting. It's you see some uh you see a bunch of different Kree characters. Some that are familiar, some we've seen in the past. Ronin, Korath the Pursuer. Then you see like Atlas and Minerva, and they make reference to another one that I was like, oh, that's a familiar name, and I can't remember the guy's name right off. It's like a throwaway character,
But
but
enough that he was somebody that you remembered, though.
yeah, it just it sounded like a familiar name.
Got it. Okay.
Um, Monica Rambeau's mom's in it. You see a very young Monica Rambeau, which I thought was interesting. I sort of hope that they play up on that at some point.
I'm curious, what
Uh,
was Coulson's role in this entire thing? Because I know he's in it. You talked a little bit about him briefly with Nick Fury, but what was his role in this?
he literally the rookie. It's they don't say it's his first day on the job, but my guess would be it's his first day on the job, and he's out there with Nick Fury, who has never encountered anything strange before. Shield is essentially is put in a sort of FBI, national security, NSA sort of role in the movie, and he comes in and is they get called to a strange situation. They show up, and somebody is. Well, if you've seen the preview, you see she crashes to a Blockbuster video,
Oh
and
yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a security guard outside the video store, and she blows through the window and comes walking out, and she's like, "I need communications devices. Where can I get that?" And he points over to a Radio Shack, and she's like, "Oh, okay," and wanders off. And of course, he calls it in, and the people who show up is LAPD or whatever, and Nick Fury. And it goes from there. So I mean, Stan Lee has got a great cameo in it.
Oh,
Uh,
see, nice CGI cameo.
no. From my understanding, this was one of the things that they filmed, and they changed it a little bit to add in something for Brie Larson. Evidently, there was a scene where she comes up, she's on a train, and it's just before she punches out the grandma
Okay.
on the train. Uh, and she's looking for the scroll and happens to look over, and there's a guy, and all you see is the cover of the Mallrats script. And he, you hear him going, "Face front, true believer, face front." And she sort of pulls the script down, and he looks up at her and just grins. And she shoots him a grin back and then keeps on going. And I thought, how cool is it that they stuck Kevin Smith in the Marvel Universe? So, after he's, Lord only knows he's only talked about him in every movie he ever made. So,
yeah, he's been all over the place, DC, Marvel, everywhere. So,
oh yeah. So it was, like I said, it was good. It was one of those things where if and here's the thing. I think this movie is really more for your wife and your daughter and your granddaughter or your niece, nephews, your niece, your sister, your mom, your whoever, that important woman in your life, because it's about strong women. It really is. I mean, they, as much as you see Carol running around in the movie, there are moments of levity. There are moments of humor. She does actually smile in the movie. You just don't see it in the previews because she's doing she's a soldier in a soldier situation in a strange environment, hunting down enemy combatants. They're not going to be walking around like, "Hey, yeah, this is so cool," So the idea that she doesn't walk around grinning really didn't surprise me. And when it did happen, it was like, oh, it's a good little pace. You got to a situation where it felt organic, and when you got that from her. But that's about it. I mean, if you're looking for a hardcore tie-in to Endgame, the mid-credit teaser ties directly into Endgame.
Okay.
The Avengers have got the beeper, and they've been powering it, and it evidently shuts off. And Captain America's like, turn it back on. Whatever you got to do, turn it back on. We need to be, like, well, who in the heck are we signaling? We have no idea, but obviously Fury did. We got to figure out what's going on. And about that time, Black Widow turns around and she's standing right behind him going, where's Nick Fury? And it cuts to, it fades to black. So, like I said, it's a pretty good movie. It's was much better than I thought it was going to be. Certainly better than the last 2 Thor movies. I would say better than the last 3 Thor movies. And I really sort of wanted to really like Thor.
So, didn't Thor only have 3 movies?
Yeah.
So you're saying better than all 3 Thor movies? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. If you say so.
Not as good as Wonder Woman. I mean, I think Wonder Woman's a really sort of a high benchmark.
Yeah.
But it came close.
Okay, so out of 5, if you were going to rate it 5 stars, you would say what, a 4, 4.5 around there?
4.
4. Okay.
Easy. Like I said, I like my Skrulls a little more villainous, but I understand why they did what they did.
Cool. Well, I would definitely like to check it out eventually, and hopefully get also Coulson back on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., even though we're not going to see that ever again, probably.
Yeah, yep.
But they did sign for and start producing season 7 already, even though 6 has not been released.
That's it.
So, but they said that 7 will probably be the last season they will have. But who knows with ABC, because they change their mind left and right, depending on what the mouse decides that day.
It's very true. And then in other news, Arrow's over after next season.
Yeah, well, yeah, they only have 10 episodes, and that's going to probably end right after the crossover, because that's generally around where the crossover is, 9-10 episodes in.
Yeah.
But you had to have seen that coming, because Stephen Amell has been saying for the past 2 seasons he doesn't want to do any more seasons. So
yeah.
That is probably going to be very disappointing. I really liked Arrow. That was probably my favorite show out of the entire universe of Arrowverse. I liked The Flash also, and then probably Legends right there as well. I would like to see it replaced with something like a Constantine show, because I really love Matt Ryan and that character when it was on NBC, and then they brought him over for the crossovers and everything, and I thought it was pretty good. On Legends of
Oh,
Tomorrow, he's kind of a little bit wonky, but he's still same character. So,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah,
Okay.
I'm disappointed in him being, last season.
Same here.
But we're not a DC podcast, so we shouldn't be talking about that.
This is true. We have failed this podcast, and we shall stop.
Yes, we're all going to be shot and killed. Anyway, but all right. So with that said, let's get on to some Faserip now. This week we were going to talk a little bit about death and dying, because some people had asked some questions about that in the past, and we didn't have a chance to cover that. Before we get into the actual rules of itself, basically when you get that kill shot, you roll your endurance just to see if you pass out or not, and then you can lose endurance step by step every time you fail that roll. Do you have any house rolls that you use for your death and dying?
Not particularly. It's just I tend to go by the book in regards to endurance feats and loss of health. Now, once you hit 0 health, you're unconscious. And I can't remember if that's actually explicitly said, and
Yeah,
sure it is. But that was one of the things where.
Yeah, it's on page 31 of. This is the condition of my book, by the way.
There you go.
That's all.
Well used, well loved.
Yeah, this one's really used up and beaten up. This is like the table copy of my books. Page 31 has the actual death and dying. What happens when you reach 0? The character becomes unconscious and stays that way for 1d10 rounds. The player then rolls endurance feat for the character and consults the kill column effects table. The result is no effect. The character is just stunned for 1d10 rounds and may regain consciousness again afterwards. If the result is endurance loss, the character begins to lose endurance ranks. And then we go from there. They're losing endurance ranks, and it goes down the little chart until it gets down, 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 until you basically die.
Yeah.
When you get down so low. But I don't think I've ever had anybody go that far as dying like that. Usually I'll just have them go unconscious, roll a couple endurance rolls, and then they'll pretty much just be hospitalized and come back. Even in the actual play that I was doing, no one had... one person got to the point towards the end, because we just put the campaign on a little bit of a hiatus for now, because we wanted to take a break after about a 2-year campaign almost, so...
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the players got pretty close to his character dying, and... Yeah, we rolled a couple rolls, and then I had him just stay unconscious for a while.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think. In the course of my games, we had one guy who... and there's a lot of drama offline with this guy. I won't get into any of that, but he decided that he would start a file on all the different superhero groups he had interacted with, collecting their identities and so on and so forth. Of course, it wasn't as a blackmail file. It was just in case, which everybody took as a blackmail file. And somehow he ended up using it as a threat. And the long and short of it was that one of the guys who was playing in the game was playing a sort of a send-up of Remo Williams.
Okay.
And if you're familiar with the character, if you're not, Remo Williams being from the Destroyer novels and the movie Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. And the character in the novels is much more lethal than the character in the movie was.
Okay.
Obviously, And this is a character who this guy had played through a couple different games, and he got close enough. It came down to initiative. The Super Speedster lost initiative, and promptly I said, "What are you going to do?" And the guy playing the Remo Williams spinoff or knockoff or whatever you want to call it said, "I'm going to punch my hand through his chest and pull his heart out." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, and he could do edge damage." And I said, "All right. Well, yeah, make an attack roll." And guy failed the dodge, failed the evade, and subsequently had his, heart ripped out, and did enough damage that he killed him, or at least would have killed him in one shot. And rather than kill the guy off, I had him. He sped up, trying to vibrate his molecules to get away, and seemingly vanished. And it was my way of being able to. He would intermittently show back up, sort of like in really weird places.
Like
Sort
the
of
Flash doing it, like in
yeah, it was like doing it was my version of the Crisis Flash thing, where he would show up and he'd be like, his chest would be wide open, he'd oh, and disappear, and people would be like, "What the hell was that?" So, that was one. The only other time I ever had somebody get killed in a game, and this was, we're going back probably 20 years for this one. There was I'd done a game that was set in Boston. Young superheroes gain their powers. One of them had Superman-like powers, had been picked on most of his life. Another one had mental powers, and the guy playing the character with the mental powers didn't like his character.
Okay.
And rather than come and say something to me, he and the Superman character decided to throw me a twist, and the Superman type character goes evil, snaps this guy's neck, and subsequently is like, "Well, what do you think?" And I'm like, "I think you should have talked to me before you did this." And ended up the Superman knockoff ended up trapped in the dark force dimension. Not Playas, but the actual dark force generation dimension. And that became a whole thing that went on. It went away. The game went away. About 7 or 8 years later, I picked it back up using one of the characters, and the last thing that the only surviving player comes into the game, and he starts developing powers sort of like this other character, and he's like, "Yeah, I can generate dark force and this and that and the other." And what ends up happening is and I'm trying to think of a way to remember how this went exactly. He went to teleport one time, and while he was in the dark force dimension, passing through it, he heard somebody speak. And it flipped him out. He was like, "I don't understand how this could happen." And what ended up happening is it came out that he was his character from the previous Boston game. And he's like, "Well, how come I don't have any memories of that?" And I said, "Do you remember the very last thing you said when S.H.I.E.L.D. came in to clean the whole situation up?" And he said, "That I'd like to forget the whole day ever happened." And I said, "Exactly." And he's like, "Oh my God, I've been mind wiped." And that's how that game unfolded across the country somewhere else. And the villain got loose, and they had to, take him down. So it was a cool game.
Yeah, sounds like it.
One of those things where that's really the only couple times that people have ever died that I made a point of, like, now, could somebody die from just stupidity? Sure, it happens.
Any game.
I mean, how many AD&D games have you failed saving throws? And it's like, you spent 2.5 hours generating Lothar the Barbarian, and suddenly he died from poison from the scorpion, the tree scorpion that you stuck your hand into. So it happens.
I don't think I've ever spent that long on a character, but that's kind of that's extreme. 2 hours, like.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just throwing out examples.
5e maybe.
I mean, Marvel characters maybe half an hour. I mean, that really depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it.
I think when we did our characters in our game here, most of the players were kind of familiar with it, but I had narrowed it down to a system that took us about 15, 20 minutes to make the character. We did the rolls, and then they wrote everything down, did all the powers, did all that stuff, and then while that player was working on the character and setting everything up, I said, figure out your background name and everything. Boom, went to the next player, next. And then we came back to the first player. This is who I am. This is my background. This is how the powers relate to each other. That's how I did it on the table. So basically the whole process took like maybe an hour or so for everybody included in that whole thing.
There you go.
So it was fun.
Oh yeah. But I mean, death, death and resurrection in the game can be very strange. It depends on how you do it. I mean, obviously, regeneration plays a factor into it. And I always thought the best depiction of regeneration, at least outside of the game, if you ever read the Wild Cards series by George Martin?
No, I have not.
If you can track them down, there's probably 24 books in the series now, but the first 12 are by far the best of the bunch. And there's a character named Billy Ray who's with the Secret Service, who basically, if you paired away all of Wolverine's powers except for his ability to fight and regeneration, this would be Billy Ray. And at one point, he gets gutted in the series. And I mean, cut up real bad. This guy just, cuts him up. And you think the character's dead, and he shows up much later. And they describe him as his regeneration works even like to the point of him being almost completely gone. But when it put him back together, his face doesn't sit quite right. His jawline sits a little further back than it needs to, and it's just slight imperfections that if you knew him before, you would get. And he's like irritated by the fact that he survived it, but he thinks he's lost a step, And it's an interesting take on it. It's one of those things where first you got to question whether you want to kill anybody in a game, and then you got to question how you're going to do it and if it's going to actually go through.
You said that was Wild Card series?
Wild Cards, yep.
By George Martin. I have to look. I add that to my list, so I remember that. It sounds kind of interesting to me. Wild Cards, George Martin. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I just added it to my Amazon list. I wonder how old these books are.
The first one came out, I think, in 84.
26 books.
I read it in high school.
Oh,
which
that
we're
was
going back
a long time
27
ago.
years ago.
That was a long time ago, so.
Back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth.
Dinosaurs. Dude,
Dirt was a novel concept.
That's
we
right.
hadn't invented it yet.
Right.
And Al Gore was still saving trees.
And thinking and only dreaming about the internet.
That's it.
But yeah. Anyway, death and dying. You have to actually consider it before the campaign starts if you want to allow death and dying rules, because it is a comic book. A lot of comic books rarely ever have anybody die. It's a special, really mega event if somebody does die, unless they're a no-name character, then they just die left and right because they're jobbers, as we say in wrestling. That's
it. Or red shirts in Star Trek.
Right, but yeah, and if you are going to have somebody die, make sure the player is kind of aware that it can happen, because if they don't and they're just like, whoa, I mean, some people are very sensitive about their characters, and you have to take that into consideration as much as you think it's really silly, but you still have to take into consideration. I've never really cared about it, to be honest, because my campaigns lean to the lethal side, and I tell them, the dice roll. I don't kill you, the dice kill you, so, I mean... That's just how it's why I was called the evil DM for many years. So anyway, so with that said, head over to classicfaserip.com is our website. Ask the DM at theevildm.com is our email address. Head over to patreon.com/WGP. You can support us for as little as $1 a month. Get early access to this podcast and many more. So we see you again, Excelsior.
Wait a minute. What about stuff that's coming out?
Oh, that's right. Yes, we forgot about that. I apologize.
Yes. We have stuff coming out.
I completely forgot about that.
At the unofficial canon project, we have stuff in the works. We have more source books coming. The Old West source book is done. It's up for preview in the group, so you can take a look at it and peruse it with all the cowboy goodness. We also have a Power Pack source book coming, Sentinel Survival Guide coming, in various stages of work. Andrew Goldstein is working on an Atlantis source book that is gigantic. You have I got talked into doing Moon Knight, a Moon Knight source book.
I did see that was popping up in the feed. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I'm gonna forego the monster source book. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I just do not have enough. The 1950s monster source book. I don't have enough source material.
Okay.
Yeah, which I wish were otherwise, but well, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Cool. So head over to the Facebook Uncanon group and check that out. We have a link in our podcast notes, and like we said before, go visit the various sites and Excelsior.
Excelsior.